afternoon and happy Wednesday to everyone joining us here on Washington Informer Live Presents. My name is Jada Ingleton, WI Content Editor, and today I have the pleasure of having a segment and conversation about something upcoming in the DMV. Really exciting, Ethiopia. So today we'll be speaking with the playwright and the artistic director of the show, which will be coming May 16th. But before we get into that, of course, I have to shout out, as you guys know, every Thursday our paper comes out. So please be on the lookout for that tomorrow. But now, for what we all came here for, please help me welcome Sybil Williams, excuse me, and Timothy Nelson.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Good to see you.
Great to see you. Great to have you guys. How are you doing today?
Really wonderful. Thank you.
You're in the last couple of days stretch before the show first gets put on. How has that been feeling? What's that been like?
It's always a race to the finish. I'm actually in the theater, so you might hear ambient noises of things going up and hopefully not coming down.
Absolutely. Well, before we jump into our questions, please just for our audience, give us a little bit about what is this show? And particularly, I would love for you to talk about why it's called the first living newspaper. That's really interesting to me.
You can start, Timothy.
Okay. Sure. The living newspapers were a wholly original American form of theater that was invented in the 1930s as part of something called the Federal Theater Project, which was a program of the government to give unemployed artists work during the Great Depression. And the Federal Theater Project had an idea to connect artists with journalists and to create pieces of theater that were dramatizations of real world news events. And the very first one of these was a play called Ethiopia that was about the Italian aggression in Ethiopia between 1934 and 1936. And it would have been performed in 1937, but it was ultimately banned by the Roosevelt administration because they wanted to end the play with a speech by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And when the administration found out about that, they effectively banned the production. The living newspapers went on to be a very successful form, and there were many famous ones that were written, but this one was the first, and it's never been performed until now.
Wow, very interesting. So what makes now the perfect time to bring this back and have this revival?
There are a couple of things that obviously the state of the world that we're in now. The living newspapers originally came out during the Depression, and world order was being shifted for economic and political reasons. We were on the cusp of World War II, and Ethiopia, the Second Italian-Ethiopian War, was recognized, or is now recognized, as sort of the gateway to World War II. But it's a shift in world order, and it's also putting us in a position where we are beginning to think about our individual role in larger political spheres differently. And so I think that Ethiopia has a very special place in sort of making us understand how we are all moving through the ride of history and what our particular responsibilities are here and now. And this play was censored, and we are living in an era where censorship is becoming more and more part of the order of the day. And so I think it's important to think about that.
Absolutely. And, to my next question before I speak, if I didn't say the names with the titles, Timothy is artistic director, Sybil is the playwright. And so I just want to talk about, in terms of the process, you guys are bringing this back more than 80 years after it was originally written. So in both of your own roles, what has that been like? And how have you been able to kind of stay true to the intent while still modernizing it for 2025 audiences?
Well, it's important to say that only half of the evening is the original 1937 play. And we've tried to stay faithful to what we imagine were the people who wanted to make it, what their intentions were, and what the style was of a living newspaper. But the second and more significant part of the evening is this new play by Sybil that responds to the history, but also threads in all the other histories. And I think one of the revelations of this piece is a deeper understanding of the nature of history itself, that history is ever more complex and is a thick fabric with many threads. And that, I think the modernization happens by putting these two pieces, old and new, into conversation with each other, into juxtaposition with each other.
That's precisely what I was doing when I was writing it. I'm reading the Arent piece. I'm imagining the Arent piece in all of its original, with its original intent to inform people about the Italian aggression of 1936. But I also, when I'm thinking about my work, I'm thinking about, as Timothy said, so many players that were so significant in addressing that issue that we actually don't hear or see a lot from. The piece focuses on, as was stated, the lives of everyday people sort of intertwined with this event. And that's what I thought about when and we'll perhaps get into that more, when I first encountered Ethiopia. Wow, this is a phenomenal conversation. This is a phenomenal document about, or documentary about a time in history. But as Howard Zinn says, there's also the people's history. So how all these things coming together, so to speak.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because one particular way that you guys have kind of reframed the lens for this particular production is by introducing a character. So, Sybil, with Mamie Richardson, can you tell us a little bit about why did you want to go with that, adding that specific lens to the conversation? And how did it kind of bring a deeper or new perspective, like you mentioned, maybe even the everyday people that were involved that was lacking originally?
There were two ways in which that happened. One, the funny story is, I tell everybody, I always thought I made Mamie up. I thought she was a character that I created. She is not. As I learned from doing my own research, and this play originally started out as a research project for Rastafari women. And Mamie Richardson was an opera singer who was also a member of the Ethiopian World Federation, one of the mansions or houses of Rastafari. And she founded, in fact, the Chicago branch of the Ethiopian World Federation in the 1930s. And the reason why she did that really speaks to what I want to talk about in this play. And that is Pan-Africanism, that her entire training as an opera singer was devoted to a larger cause, very much like Paul Robeson and C.L.R. James and so many others, Josephine Baker, that devoted their lives to a larger Pan-Africanist cause. She was connected to that. And that is what I find so fascinating about her, and the idea of Americans taking on Ethiopia and the Second Ethiopian-Italian War in general, that this was a time when African Americans and Africans throughout the diaspora came together to find a common cause, and that was to fight for Ethiopia. And Mamie led that cause. Mamie actually was entrusted by the emperor to carry a message of a land grant to the people of the diaspora in 1966. So it's an amazing story she has.
Excellent. And Timothy, do you want to touch on how you, and also with the composer that's a part of this, how were you able to kind of add to this vision that Sybil had?
Well, I mean, actually, it's more the other way around. Sybil gave us a great gift, and what I'm about to say and what Sybil's just said is so aligned that it feels like it must have been planned, but it was pure accident, or the universe giving it to us. One of the in-series spaces that we try to live into is lifting up voices from the past, singers from the past, who lived incredible lives that we know very little bit about these days. And we work closely with the Denise Graves Foundation and their program Hidden Voices to do this. Mamie Richardson was a member of Mary Cardwell Dawson's National Negro Opera Company, which was an all-black opera company based in DC that toured around the globe. And we knew nothing about Mamie. We only knew about Mary Cardwell Dawson. So to be able to do this piece and accidentally also be deepening this other work of ours to explore these great voices that were also doing socially conscious work. And Mamie Richardson was also a composer, a poet. She was many things. So it's been a gift that Sybil gave us. And I don't want to speak for Janelle, but I mean, another gift that Sybil's play gave to Janelle as a composer was that she is able to draw from so many canons to make this score. This score has Verdi, it has opera, but it also has reggae, it has spirituals, it has jazz, more traditional African musics, it has anthems from around the world. I mean, it's the one of the richest scores, musical collages that I've ever experienced in my career.
It certainly sounds like it, and it makes me think of, well, kind of getting me excited with multiple different questions I want to go into. But while we're on the topic, specifically, I want to know, being that this is telling the story of something that went on with Ethiopia and Italy, and now we also have, as Sybil mentioned, the Pan-African aspect. There's reggae music, so it's really a global sort of conversation and reach here. How do you want to be able to pass that message to global audiences, and what do you even want local audiences to take away from that perspective?
I started this work because I wanted people to know there's a very specific reason why I began this particular work. And it is because there was a comment made that African Americans aren't very interested in international politics. I was like,
Mhm.
immediately what came to me was the living newspapers in the 1930s, because African Americans, or the living newspaper in Pan-Africanism, because African Americans in the 1930s took on the cause of Ethiopia when Italy invaded. Actually, before that, when Haile Selassie was crowned emperor, that uplift was felt. That reign, that crowning, became the crowning of Africans throughout the diaspora. When Italy invaded, it became the pain of Africans throughout the diaspora. And there were people campaigning for Ethiopia from Harlem all the way to Mississippi, all the way to Nebraska. Africa has always been the cause of African Americans, and the Second Ethiopian-Italian War made that so crystal clear. So I wanted to combat this notion that Pan-Africanism was isolated and that African American people didn't care about Africa. That's absolutely not true.
Absolutely, and that's very important. Even, here at the Informer, we have our international and specifically Win Africa section for, bringing those things to attention. It's very important. And I must say, I love that, we have Timothy live at the theater, and then we've got Bob Marley in the back with Sybil. So it's like really just, it's perfect. It's all really showing exactly what's going on with this production. And I really want to ask about, there's so many different themes that are touched on here that are still common in today's world, like you both mentioned. So I want to ask specifically as it pertains to censorship of media and the arts, being that this play was banned, being that media speaks truth to sort of these different things. So with the play, how do you kind of want to touch on that historic reference that, things we were seeing happen in 1937 are also not that different from what we're seeing happen right now?
Yeah, the piece has incredible contemporary resonance in many ways. One of those is about how we are, whether we know it or not, we are always engaged in a global conversation, and have a global complicity for the positive or for the negative. And the historic Ethiopia is very much about how the power structures of the world did nothing to help. And of course, with everything going on in global politics today, that's particularly resonant, though this is a theme and a story that repeats over and over again. And then, as Sybil alluded to, also this question of censorship, which is very much, and sadly increasingly so, front of mind for us today, and particularly for arts organizations. And I think what's salient for me, at least, is that, I mean, as Dr. King said, that the arc of history is long, and you cannot silence the arts. The piece had come to light. It had to be voiced eventually. And if it took 90 years or 190 years, it was sort of inevitable. And like a lot of arts organizations, we lost our funding from the NEA for this project a week ago. And it was really important for our organization and for the artists engaged in this project that they aren't going to silence the piece this time, that its time has come. And the larger message that the arts can't be silenced. They will come to fore.
Absolutely. Beautiful.
I think that, as I said, we're entering an era where I don't want ever to think about censorship as normalized, and really thinking about how two things: how we never allow that to become the norm, because it is freedom of speech is the cornerstone of democracy. But again, with great freedom of speech comes great responsibility. Freedom of speech now is being bandied about as if I can say any hurtful, injurious thing to anybody that I want. That's not what is meant. It is meant that as your active civic responsibility is to engage the issues of the day, whether they be national or international, with some informed opinion that allows for positive action. So I think the living newspaper still is at the forefront of that, right? And I think the other thing that is happening is, yes, we are part of a global conversation. What the play indicts, the first one in particular, Arent's piece, indicts us in a way that makes us consider, when we hear about something that's not happening on our shores, and the second half of the evening picks this up, what is our immediate local responsibility? Your responsibility doesn't have to be large. You don't have to run out and join an army, though people like Salaria Key did in the 1930s. An African-American woman in Harlem did go fight against Franco. A bit of her story is picked up in the second piece as well. But you don't have to do that. Being informed, bearing witness in an informed way is politically incredibly important.
Absolutely. And both have kind of touched on this next question, but just in terms of what sort of long-term impact, of course, with, kind of giving people that sense of responsibility and action, but outside of just the fact that this is a historical play that you guys are putting on, what do you hope that this play will do for the DC community and beyond?
Immediately, I want people to go out and say, I really want to research what happened in the second Ethiopian-Italian War. Like, what was happening here in DC? What did people do? Who is Mamie Richardson? What was the American Negro Opera? What are those things? Like the things that I just don't know. Who was Malaku Bayan? Why did he come to Howard? How is the Ethiopian World Federation tied to this young medical student at Howard? There's so many histories that we could uncover. There's so many people here in DC who built permanent relationships with Ethiopia that are long lasting. We did mention Imahoy. Imahoy Sade Gebru is an Ethiopian nun whose music we tap into as well, who just wrote she's called the Honky Tonk Nun, who wrote some of the most incredibly beautiful music, who has a foundation here in DC to help young school children who want to get involved with music. So I want people to know that there are Africans, Afro-Caribbean, African-Americans, Africans around the diaspora working to do amazing things here in DC for the uplift of all of us. That's important. Long-term impact research. Who are these people? If you just want to know one thing, who was Mamie? That's significant. I think that is significant. I think that now that history is being assaulted and that African-American histories are being assaulted, all of us are the keepers of this wisdom and knowledge for generations to come. And I just want people to realize that.
Excellent. So my next question, in wrapping down, how has putting on Ethiopia been a service to you both specifically?
Something that's been on my mind a lot in these final rehearsals is to think about this group of people, and we know so little about them, but this group of people that came together to put together this play 90 years ago. We know that some of them were Africans, some of them were African Americans. We know some of them were, all of them were down and out artists, journalists, and that they poured themselves into this totally revolutionary, both stylistically and thematically, piece, and never got to see it come to life. And there's a New York Times article that is about the one reading the piece had. It was never performed, but it had a reading, and talks about how exuberantly and how excited they threw themselves into the performance. And it is just such a deep privilege and a responsibility to be able to do it finally. And it's one of those once in a lifetime experiences to think that we kind of get to complete in a way their story that was left unfinished, to pick up their mantle.
Absolutely. Sybil, do you have anything you want to add to that? Or Timothy, basically?
I think he hit the nail on the head, even so much so that, like I said, I thought I'd made up this woman who sang before the emperor, and come to find out she lived. And as a friend of mine said, no, Sybil, that was her tapping you on the shoulder saying, remember me, remember me. And so I am humbled. I am humbled by all of the spirits who continue to come through and visit Timothy and I and say, remember us, remember us.
That's beautiful. I really love that. So I mean, in terms of, I know we talked heavily about the research aspect that the youth can take from this. Is there anything else that you guys would add in terms of what youth audiences can get from Ethiopia? Besides learning some things they might not have ever known or people they've never heard of.
Listening to beautiful music. I mean, Timothy has done an amazing job with the directing, but Janelle has composed some of the most beautiful music I've ever heard. So it would just be such a thrill to have audiences hear that.
Wonderful. And we have this poster pulled up right here with all the information. Please, any closing thoughts in terms of the production itself, what it's been like putting it together for you all, and how excited you are to be opening on Friday, possibly?
No, thanks for having us. Always such a joy to talk about these things, especially with Sybil.
And same, and thank you so much. And please come out and join us. We'd love to have you.
Well, I will be at Saturday's show for sure. So I cannot wait to see. I mean, the more I hear about this, the more intrigued I am to actually see it all come together. So I do actually have one more closing thing that I meant to ask. Just in general, what are some things, and maybe this will be a point that audiences will go in thinking themselves, what are some things that are pretty telling about these, current events that you guys, as you said, are dramatizing? That are kind of still relevant in modern society that you see still happening?
I think Tim mentioned the NEA grant that, suddenly found its way out the door and in. That was one of the things. Also, just this week, the removal of the Librarian of Congress, the takeover of the Kennedy Center. Arts are an incredibly powerful tool. If you don't walk away with anything else, understand how powerful art is to give us an experience that wholly transforms us. And when someone starts to try and take away arts, they understand its power. They understand the ability it has to transform, to make you think and behave differently. And we can never allow anybody to take away the power of art. We have to always stand in its power and fight for its power.
Beautiful. I couldn't have said any better than myself. Thank you so much today for joining me, Timothy and Sybil. It was a great pleasure talking to you both and learning more about the show. For those that are tuning in, again, we have the poster up here. Get your tickets. Join me on Saturday. Join us this weekend, or join May 30th to June 1st when it comes back in Baltimore. But in the meantime, we'll be tuned in. Tickets can be purchased at this link on the screen. And you both have a great day and good luck with everything.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us again. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that wraps up our live present segment for today. I hope not only did you all take away something, but also took away a link to go get your tickets to go see Ethiopia live. It is going to be a great production. It is a never before seen production. So if that is not history making in itself, I'm sure you will walk away with some more facts that are very important to what we're seeing in today's times. But in the meantime, you can look out for a review after this weekend show that I'll be viewing on Saturday. And of course, look out for more content in our paper that is coming out tomorrow. But until then, I'm Jada Ingleton, and thank you for tuning in with the Washington Informer Live Presents.